Hey everyone, this is Bob McIntosh from MassHire Lowell Career Center. So I have a very special guest with me. I'm really excited about this guest speaker webinar. We're going to be talking about the job search from the perspective of a hiring manager. And my guest is Gerry Schmidt, and I got to tell you, he's a former customer of ours, and my experience with him has been excellent. I think you're really going to enjoy this presentation. But do me a favor, look to your right and see that you can raise your hand, you can ask questions, and you can download not one, but 3 presentations. And I suggest that you do that now in case then we have any kind of mechanical difficulties. So do me a favor, would you raise your hand if you can hear and see us? Beauteous, Gail. Excellent, Jeff. Thank you. All right, Jackie. Good to see you. Excellent. Yep. All right. Hey, seeing a lot of familiar faces. Very excited about this. We may have an international visitor too, so who knows? But in any case, I'm not really a big fan of going into a lot of introduction about my guest, but I will show you that Gerry is currently the VP of Operations and a strategic advisor at L3 Harris Technologies. And he can talk more about that. I understand that he's going to be taking on a different role. And then prior to that, when he was working here at the Career Center with us, he was the vice president and general manager of MSI Transducers. You may recognize his profile because I often show it when I do is your LinkedIn profile strong enough? Because I use it as a great example of a profile. He worked really hard on it when he was here. And, Gerry's, what I would call Gerry is a giver. And not because he gave us cheesecake, okay, but really because he helps job seekers. He meets with them for networking coffees and so forth. But about the cheesecake, I had this little policy, or I used to make this joke that if I helped anyone, then they needed to give me a slice of cheesecake. I didn't take, I didn't think, I'm sorry, I didn't feel that people had to take me seriously, but Gerry certainly did. And he brought in this humongous cheesecake that was shared among the staff. I cannot forget that. So in any case, Gerry, say hi to the group, would you?
Yeah, hello to everybody, and maybe some of you even recognize me. I spent some time at the Career Center, and thank you, Bob, for inviting me today.
Oh, thank you.
I'm really glad to join the group. A lot of people gave me help when I was in job search mode. Bob among them, and the rest of the great folks at the Career Center really made a difference for me, and glad to have the opportunity to pass along some of what I've learned. Hopefully it's of help to you. If you even find one piece of information today that helps your search, then that would make me really pleased. So it's just my way of paying it forward. Other people help me. I'd like to pass that along. So yeah, thanks for inviting me today, Bob.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Pay it forward. And I'm telling you, you do that, Gerry. And sometimes I feel like I go to the well too often because I send people to talk with you and you gladly accept. But I really appreciate that, Gerry. I really do. You are a giver. You are definitely a giver. And so if that's one lesson you all learn, is that in your job search, while you're networking, you have to give as well as take. You can't just give. You can't just take. You have to give as well as take. So let's start. And I'm going to ask you this first question. So you were at MSI for 19 years. What led to you being laid off?
Yeah, so this is a bit of a sad story. The founder of MSI, his name is Les Bowen. Fabulous guy. He got sick with pancreatic cancer, and I don't know if any of you are familiar with that form, but it's not easily diagnosed. And within 5 months of finding out, he was gone. And that was in 2012. So I had been there for 16 years at the time. kind of a shock to all of us. The company, when this type of thing happens to a private business, there was a trust set up. The company went into trust. The trustees took a look at the business and decided that they weren't comfortable continuing to run the business. So they asked me to help them sell the business, which I did.
Wow.
It took a bit of time to do that, but by 2014, we had lined up a buyer, and that deal closed at the end of 2014. So I found out the first week that the new owner was on site that they were going to move all of the production operations to the West Coast.
Oh wow! Yeah.
Asked me to help that to happen, and so for the next year, I helped them to transition it out to a factory that they had out there that had all the space, and the people, but not enough contracts to keep the facility busy. So that was their intent all along. And I guess I knew at that point I was kind of working myself out of a job when I was doing that move.
I'm not laughing at you, Gerry, but I have to ask the audience. I have to say, has this happened to anyone else? Did you have to transition the company, and was your job replaced because of this? Raise your hand, please. And then, by the way, okay, yep, I see at least one hand going up. Oh, more. Yep, absolutely. And by the way, if you have any questions, please just shoot them out to Gerry and I, and I'll try to get to them. I don't want to be the only one asking questions, so if you have any questions, please do that.
Absolutely.
So that is a sad story. That definitely is a sad story. But you know, and I'm sure a lot of people who are in the job search right now want to know, you know, what was your emotional state while you were looking for work? You know, what emotions did you experience during that time? And I think you and I spoke recently, and you said that being out of work for the first month was heck. But what did you go through the whole process?
Yeah, so for me, it was actually a 12 months until I found another full-time position. And yeah, you know, the first few months, couple months, you know, a lot of self-doubt, you know, whether I made the right decision. I would have had to move to the West Coast in order to stay with the company. And, you know, I had roots here, my family's here, my kids, you know, all set down roots here. So we really wanted to stay, but you yourself at that point, you know, did I do the right thing? I knew I had a lot of experience and some skills to fall back on, but after a couple of months of, you know, going at it, and you know, I wasn't setting myself up for interviews well, and you begin to wonder, hey, you know, is this really gonna come out right? You know, and especially without a paycheck, you know, you're thinking, you question yourself a lot, and
Right,
I certainly.
Right. Well, I always say that, you know, I'm sorry, I always say that our customers, the ones who are looking for work right now, you know, I admire them. I admire them for what they're going through and the effort they're putting into it. And I'm sure many of them had the same kinds of feelings that you did. I know that when I was out of work, you know, it was not necessarily the money that was missing. It was the sense of purpose. You know, it was missing going to work, and I was a very, very bad unemployed person. So let me see. I think I have a question or a statement. I don't put my age of years of college graduation on my resume. What should a 65-year-old do to be hired? So do you agree with that? Do you agree with that? I'm sorry, practice?
I've been told that, and I agree with that it's better not to put that on your resume. Yeah. It's not that they're not going to eventually have that in your employee record once you're hired, but you want to get past those initial stages, and people will make an assumption once you're at a certain age that you're just looking to finish up somewhere, and I think you want to give yourself as much opportunity as you can to get through those initial gates. So.
Sure. Yeah, and I find that a lot of people, they aren't willing. I mean, they're not ready to retire at 65. They may want to work until they're 70 or even longer. So yeah, I agree with you. You know, the purpose of your resume is to get you to the interview, and then once you're there, then you can, you know, show them what you have to offer them. So one person also says missing purpose, absolutely, in terms of being out of work, you know, that emotional distraught and so forth. Okay, so I'm going to go on with my next question, and that is, let me see, I can't see it. Okay, what did you do in the first couple of weeks after leaving MSI? Or do you want to go even further than that? You know, what were you going through? What was your way of looking for work during the first weeks or months even?
Yeah, so it's interesting. This is a good question because in my prior role, I was serving in a business development role. So I was meeting with people at trade shows and conferences, and it just turned out that there happened to be a conference happening in the Washington, D.C. area a couple of weeks after I finished up at MSI.
Yeah.
And, you know, I thought about it and I said, hey, this is an opportunity for me to go connect with them. I'm usually connecting with people on behalf of my company. This is a way for me to connect with some of those same people on behalf of myself. And so, you know, I have family in that area. So I registered and I got in my car and I drove down, stayed with my folks down there. And I met with people for a couple of days at this conference. And I got to make some connections. None of them led to a job, but I think it was a good thing to do. It made me feel like I was taking control of the situation.
Sure.
Still wasn't kind of networking the way that I'll talk about, but it kind of got me out of first gear, which was good. And I also I also reached out by email to a lot of my business contacts just to let them know that I was in the job search mode. And I think that's always a good idea. The more people know that you're looking, the more paths you can have to get into another place that's a good fit. So I think that started me on the right path, but I wasn't kind of networking the way I'll talk about here today.
Right. So I mean, I have two thoughts about that. And the first thought is that, you know, you dug your well before you were thirsty. In other words, you had been networking as part of your job at MSI. And my second thought is that you let people know, and almost anyone who you work with or who you know that you were out of work, and you did this via email. So I want to ask the audience if they have done that, if they have sent out email that they're out of work, maybe attached their resume, you know, however they went about it. Raise your hand if you've done that, please. Okay, I'm not seeing many hands go up. Oh, there we go. Okay. Yep, now I'm seeing more hands. Good. Gerry doesn't have the benefit of seeing you guys raise your hand, but I get a great kick out of it. It's called what I call it, you know, using your hand raising muscles. But in any case, so now, but at the very beginning, when you were out of work, how did you go about your job search? Were you applying online mainly, or did you know, networking automatically kick in?
Yeah, so I had some idea of the companies that I'd like to connect with, and what I was doing, was I was going to their website, reviewing the openings, and then applying to those. And I got to say, you know, I've sent more than I'd care to admit, and got really no response. And my problem was I didn't know anybody in those companies. And you know, they say that networking accounts for 70 or 80% of the jobs that are found, especially once you get to a certain level. And I really believe especially after my experience, I really was going about it wrong. I was kind of hitting these companies cold without knowing anybody.
Right.
And companies want to have, they want to have a known quantity. They want to know something about you. They want to have someone vouch for you, that you're a, you know, that you'll be able to do the job that you're saying you can do. And it makes all the difference to have somebody hand carry your resume to somebody within the company. And that's what I found I had to do differently.
So going to the hiring aspect of this webinar, where you're going to talk about how, your method of hiring and so forth. Did you feel really comfortable, more so comfortable when someone was referred to you than as opposed to getting a resume that had been through the ATS and, looking at it and so forth? Were referrals really the gold here?
Yeah, I think I think you'll talk to just about anybody, and if they can have a connection to somebody other than just through, a tracking system, it makes a big difference. So certainly in my current role, it makes a huge difference.
Okay, so I've been neglecting our audience here. I got a question here, and it's how did you decide what companies to target?
Yeah. So for me, in my prior role in business development, I made contact with certain companies in this field. But
so you knew these companies, yeah.
Yeah, but I didn't, things over time change. And so those contacts may have been 20 years old, and I knew about the companies, but I didn't have a personal connection in those companies at the time. So I think just by being in the industry, you get to know who does what in the industry, but that doesn't give you an end, and that was my problem.
So one member of the audience says that she made phone calls. Suzanne made phone calls, and I think she's referring to, reaching out to people who would be potential references for her. I think that's what she's talking about. But in any case, yeah. So, okay, yes, she says yes. So she confirms what I said. So, this is something that we always say here. We always say that referrals are gold, and that's what you aspire to be, is a referral. And that it comes down to networking. And so we're going to get into more of that in just a little bit. All the questions are just sort of zooming in, and I'm trying to trying to keep up with them. One person asked, do you feel age and years of experience should be avoided being mentioned if going after freelance or part-time work? So that's a good point, because you actually did do some consulting work, in your job search, right? So
yeah,
what do you think of that question?
Yeah, so I personally put myself out there with years of experience, as long as it doesn't highlight too closely your age. If you're like me and you're approaching 60, you don't want to focus on that as much. But I have, let's say, over 20 years of experience in business development. I don't mind highlighting that, because that doesn't say my age, and it does add to your credentials to say that you've got experience doing things.
Yeah, that's something that I sometimes fail to mention, is that the higher you are in terms of status, in terms of employment, maybe the more experience you have on your resume is actually a plus. Would you agree with that?
I would, especially in the role that she was describing, which you were thinking about doing consulting, which I did some of that too, and it made a difference for me.
And so, by doing this consulting work, when you went in for interviews, you were able to talk about it, right? You were able to talk about the experience you had acquired, rather than just saying, well, I've been looking for work. Do you think that was helpful, Gerry?
It really was. Yeah. So part of how I got onto a good path was I decided, maybe I can't just take a conventional path into, learning about other organizations. And I saw a need at a company that was down in Canton, and I offered to do consulting for them
Mm-hmm.
with the
I remember
idea that it could lead to a permanent position ultimately.
Right.
And I also put a bid in on an SBIR proposal, which I partnered with another person I had worked with before, and amazingly we won. So I got 6 months of work out of that. And
Good.
so those things going into when I started to land interviews, going into those interviews and being able to talk about the fact that I was doing work currently and it was relevant work, it changed the dynamic of the discussion from, hey, do you have a job for me, from that to, hey,
This is
look,
what I can bring you, right?
this is what I've been doing and
What
look
I've
at what
done.
you're missing
Yeah.
out on without having me on the team, right? So it changes the dynamic a bit.
Absolutely. So would you say that having a side hustle that's closely related to what you do would be a good idea?
Yeah,
You know,
absolutely.
let's say you're a webmaster, right? And you're designing some websites for your kids' school. You know, do you think that would be a good idea, just to keep up with the skills and to show that you've
Yeah,
been doing something?
absolutely. Even, if it's volunteer work and it's relevant, it says a lot about you personally when you're doing that type of work, but it also shows that you're staying current and your skills are up to date. You're going to give yourself a leg up on others if you're doing that thing.
So one person asked, how did Gerry get to L3? Did he have connections? Do you want to go into that? That process?
I'd love to
I
talk
sort
about
of
it. It's sort of
love it. Yeah.
So when I talk about networking, it's networking with new people that you meet, but it's also staying in touch with people you've worked with in the past. And this is a sort of an unusual story. I helped to design a system that the Navy uses for its sonar on submarines back 30 years ago. I was part of a team that worked on that. And that system eventually got to end of life, and they needed to do a technical refresh to design a next generation system. And it just turns out the timing of it. I happened to be in touch with the group, some past colleagues that started their own company called Chesapeake Sciences, and they said, hey, we're going to get another contract in, but we need some help running this at our Rhode Island site. And you know about the system because you helped to design the prior one, and wouldn't you come work with us again? And it was just reaching out and congratulating that past president on his retirement that brought up the opportunity. So if I hadn't made that phone call, and I think I actually made the phone call, if I recall, from Lowell right after one of the sessions that I attended. So I kind of remember this like it was yesterday, because it just out of the blue, they said, hey, we know you, we know what you've done in the past. Why don't you come work for us? And it took still 6 months for that opportunity to crystallize because they hadn't gotten the contract yet. But just staying in touch with people is a big deal. And people you've worked with before, people who were clients before, just reaching out to them and staying in touch is a good thing, especially during the job search process.
And it may not come easy to some people, though. It may not come easy. So that is one of my questions. And let's see. Okay, so I think really, we've talked about a time when you were doing the job search wrong and what you did to correct it. So networking, okay, so networking was a huge factor in your job search efforts. It might not have been directly responsible for you landing at L3 Harris, but how did you go about it? I think you've also talked about that. So another question I have is, for those who feel uncomfortable about networking, what are your suggestions? I mean, you mentioned that you called people, and to me, making a phone call like that seems pretty tense, pretty maybe intimidating. So what are your suggestions about people who are having a hard time networking?
Yeah, so I think I think what we got to remember when we're networking, we're not asking people for a job. That's a tense thing to do, to call somebody and say, hey, do you have work, right? That's not what you're really doing with networking. What you're doing is you're trying to connect with people who can ultimately connect you in with the companies that you'd like to be hired by, right? So it's it's a different approach, and I have to admit, I watched and learned from others. I was doing this, in my opinion, I was doing it wrong until I took a little different tack on it. And so here's what I did. I attended networking events. I met as many people as I could who had related interests. And I wasn't concerned whether they were in my field. And that's going to sound kind of funny. Why would you talk to venture capitalists, financial people? Why would you do that? And the reason why is,
and so on. Yeah, why would you do that?
Yeah. People were unrelated to what I do, right? But remember, we all have hundreds of connections that aren't necessarily in our field, and the people you're talking to are also going to have connections.
True. Absolutely.
To perhaps, I was looking for an engineering company. A venture capitalist is going to come across companies that do that type of work. So, I wasn't connecting with them to ask them for a job. I'm connecting with them to make follow-on connections, and it's all about doing that. After I would attend an event, I would then follow up with the people that I found were receptive to doing networking, and I would invite them for coffee, and here's how I would start the discussion. I would start the first half of the entire meeting, which might have been an hour meeting over coffee. The first half of it was all about learning about them, what they're doing, and
asking questions.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So I'm talking to them, asking them what they're doing, what's their next step in their career, what kind of companies are you interested in connecting with, and finding out who I could introduce them to from my network. And so when Bob talks about, hey, build your connections up over 500 people, the reason why you need to do that is because one of the main reasons is you're helpful to.
Are you talking about LinkedIn connections, or are you talking about actual people?
I'm talking about both, right? So building up your LinkedIn connections helps you to be a good networking person for helping others make connections. And that's important because if you're able to help them, people naturally want to help you. And so the second half of a coffee meeting I would have with people, I'd bring out my one-page networking profile and talk a little bit about where I'm headed, what companies I'd like to connect with. And people want to help you. They'll say, yeah, I know somebody in this company, or I know somebody who might be in marketing over here, but they could introduce you to whoever might be in the engineering side or the business development side. And so that was a really important part of the process. So this is an example that Bob's showing here. There's an organization called SENG. It's a senior executive networking group that's local here and they meet in Burlington. They meet online now, actually. But when you join this group, if you're at a higher level, this is mostly a director or an above type group, but they'll ask you to prepare a profile like this. And the very most important part of this profile is way at the bottom. It's my target company list. It's a little hard to see on here, but you want to tell people who your target company list is. And so you can see that this person has, like 25 different companies that they're trying to connect with. And it just makes it so much easier to have this discussion over coffee to say, oh, you're looking for somebody in, L3 communications. I happen to have somebody over here. Let me do an introduction. And my rule was, if I promised to do an introduction for somebody, I did it within 48 hours. People need to know that you're going to follow through. And when you follow through, they will do the same. And people are just great about this. And I think you'll find if you kind of follow this type of process, you'll get some introductions, and it'll snowball because you'll get one or two introductions out of every one of these meetings, and then that'll lead to one or two more. And so, as I mentioned to Bob, toward the end of this process, I was meeting with 3 or 4 people a day. keeping Starbucks in business, I think.
I know you were.
Bob
That's
and I
right.
ran into each other at a
I
Starbucks.
don't know if I told the audience this, but I did run into you at Starbucks in Billerica when you were meeting with a job seeker. You had been employed and you were meeting with a job seeker, and
Yeah.
I felt like I was running in, interfering with your conversation. But again, an
That was great.
example of giving. So you not only were seeking help from other people and presenting your executive networking sheet, but what was I saying? But you also were helping other people in the job search, correct?
Yeah, and I think anybody who's gone through this, and it was like I said, it was a bit of an emotional process to go through a job search for this long.
Yeah.
Anybody who's gone through it, you want to help others to not have it so rough. And I had it rough. I mean, it was, you like I said, there's a lot of self-doubt. You do it for a little while and you think, hey, is this going to come out right? And a little helping hand at the beginning would have made a huge difference for me. And that's what, I've tried to do that a little bit for other people who are in this mode. So that was the process I used, and I think it helped me a lot. So hopefully you'll take a nugget or two out of that and be able to apply it.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm going back to what you're talking about. Making those phone calls, and as I said, it's intimidating to people. So kudos to you for doing that. Did it feel like it became now a matter of necessity, or have you always been comfortable making those phone calls or sending those connection requests on LinkedIn?
Yeah, no, LinkedIn makes it kind of easy. Sending a quick note on LinkedIn is easier. A phone call takes a little more planning, and it's hard to catch people at a free time when they can have a discussion. So, if you can try and set up a connection in advance before doing a call, just because people are got jam-packed days, and it's hard to find a good moment where they can really focus on what you're talking to them about. So, but yeah, no, I think LinkedIn.
Yeah, we call those soft introductions.
Yeah, and the other thing that does help, and I think Bob, you brought it up yesterday. We talked about informational interviews. If you can diffuse the pressure of, you don't want to give people the idea that if they meet with you that they're kind of obligated to help you find a job. That's not why you're networking. You're networking to learn a little bit about what's happening in your field and make further connections. You want to take that pressure off the table.
So I got to get back to our audience because I've again been neglecting them. But Patty, yes, you are going to have this as an example. All you need to do is download it. And then also you're going to have a template where you can create your own networking sheet, professional networking sheet. One person asked, so many people accept my connection request on LinkedIn, but do not engage in conversations so we can build relationships. What are your thoughts on this? Well, I'll first tell you what my thoughts are, and then Gerry will tell you his thoughts. My thoughts are, take action. Send them direct messages, comment on their posts, follow them, whichever it may be, and just follow up. Be in control of your own job search in terms of LinkedIn. What do you think, Gerry?
No, I totally agree with that. You got to engage people on things that are of interest to them, at the beginning. If you're talking, if you're able to, assuming that you're in the same field and you're able to talk about, new things that are happening in the field, people will engage on that. I also would like to give the recommendation that, and I get requests a lot to connect as well. And I'm always surprised when I get a request and there's nothing written. There's just, connect with me.
Right,
and
exactly.
I think you got to engage with people. You got to explain to them a little bit about why you'd like to connect. I guess there's so many people out there that are maybe misusing LinkedIn too, that they're trying to market products through LinkedIn, and they're not using it for networking. And so you want to assure people that you're using it for the right purpose. And so it's easier to get people to connect when you explain, why you would like to have a connection with that person.
Okay, good. So let's go on to the next phase, and this is where Gerry's going to be talking about, him as a hiring manager. What are some of his processes in terms of, hiring people? And I'm sure a lot of you are wondering this. I'm sure a lot of you are wondering, what's in the mind of the hiring manager? What I know, what I've come to realize is that not everyone uses recruiters yet. Whenever there's an article or whenever there's a, presentation, it seems to center on recruiters. So yeah, I was talking to Gerry beforehand, and he did use recruiters in his job search. And now as a hiring authority, he uses recruiters to help him. So we're going to go to that phase now. And because one person did ask, so let's see. I forgot, I lost it right here, but in any case, we'll cover it definitely. So in a position of hiring people, what do you look for in a candidate?
Yeah, so I don't think this will surprise anybody that one of the most important things that I look for is not necessarily the skills that are on the resume. I choose, I look at somebody's resume and I just assume that that's a given, that the person has the right skills and that they're qualified. What I'm looking for is fit for the organization, and really I want to answer the question, is this person going to be part of the solution or part of a problem, right? So, and I know that probably doesn't come across quite right, but it's, cultural fit is a big deal. And people come from different organizations, and maybe their prior organization did things a different way. And you want to find people that can adapt to a new environment and work effectively with others. And so, we talk about, the difference between EQ and IQ. Emotional quotient is what
it's real, isn't it? Huh?
It's an important thing. Yeah. If you're bringing somebody new into an organization, you want to know that they can manage their emotions in a positive way, that they can kind of reduce the level of stress and diffuse conflict, empathize with others, communicate effectively. If somebody enters an organization and isn't focused on doing that at all, then I have to solve the problem, right? I have to either bring them over to the new culture, and that takes time. That can take months and months of work, and help them to work a different way, or they won't stay. And sometimes it's by their own choice that they end up having to leave. But if you can head that off at the beginning, it's better for everybody, right? So I look for people that have that kind of balance, and also people who are striving to learn and improve, because joining in another organization always involves learning, right? You're going to learn new people, who does what within the organization, and you're going to have to learn new skills regardless of what you're coming in with. You may have been the expert in your prior company, but in this new company, it's going to take something different. And so people that can adjust and adapt are key. And so a lot of the questions I'll ask during an interview are just trying to understand people, on a basic level, who they are, how they think, and how well they are able to adjust.
So, but of course you ask the technical questions as well, right? To see if they can actually do the job and if they've had experience doing that. But you're telling us that it's not all about the alphabet soup. It's not meeting 10 out of the 10 technical requirements. You're saying that you're looking into the candidate's personality, because that's really important. It's really important that they, are a fit for the culture. Yeah. And I need to see a raise of hands of how many of you have hired people and did exactly what Gerry's talking about and will continue to do what Gerry's talking about. Raise your hand, please. All right, Ann, good. Ann, 2 Anns. Brett, Corinne, always good to see you. Charlie, good to see you. Siobhan, hey, Daphne. Oh man, you got a lot of supporters, Gerry, who really feel this. Gail, Jackie, John, Karen. I can't go through all 75 of y'all, but really, I think we can all, Susan, excellent. I think we can all agree that this is really important. Let me see if there are other questions that have rolled in, because again, I don't want to neglect our audience. Okay, so be part of the solution, someone says. Someone's having trouble with the webinar. Okay, someone wants to know how you join the SANG group, and I'm going to answer that question. You have to be invited to it, and you have to find someone who will, as again, refer you to the SANG group. So, and I tell you though, I've had a couple of people who I've sent to Gerry, and I've said, Gerry, could you get Doug into the SANG group? And he did it. Of course, he had to talk with Doug and so forth. Let's see. Okay, I know I've missed some questions, but I think I've caught up with most of them. Let's go to another one of mine, and that would be, here we go. And this is something that a lot of people are struggling with, is the Zoom or the Skype interviews. Have you had to hold any of those lately? Have you had to hire someone using that technology? And how did that go?
Yeah, so occasionally we will do those over Zoom, and I think they go okay. It's nice you feel a little bit more of a personal connection when you do a Zoom meeting than a telephone meeting. But
right.
But I don't think it's a pivotal thing. And I know your question is about, was their background an important part? Yeah, I think everybody recognizes that we're doing things differently these days. Yeah. We're not able to meet in person, which is what I would always have preferred. But we also recognize that it's that you're kind of stuck with the medium that you're using here, and it's not perfect. I think as long as you're not showing yourself on the beach, I don't think that sends the greatest message. But everybody is pretty
well. There are some managers who really I mean, they reject candidates because they don't have the proper lighting, background, sound. They think, well, these people don't care. They don't care about their image. But I think that what you're saying is that you, along with other hiring managers, are being more accepting of it, because it comes down to empathy, really. Understanding that today's world is different, and so are people's lives during these Zoom interviews. So anything else to add? Because I do see, let's see.
No, I'll add something. I appreciate you guys being so tolerant of me. I'm inviting you here into my living room. And
I asked Gerry if he would light up this Christmas tree.
Yeah, it's also not the most business environment, but we all kind of adjust, and this worked well for me today.
Yeah. Someone writes, wrong background? How can my own home be the wrong background? Huh. What do you say to that?
I don't think it's a big factor, and I think everybody recognizes that we're doing a lot from home these days. Myself, I'm working remotely a majority of my time, and we're doing that to keep the numbers of people in the office down. And so I think people are very understanding of that right now. We've all been through a hard year, and we know we have to do things differently, and we've done that, right?
Right. And one person writes, wouldn't it matter more if their job was remote? In other words, if if they were representing the company. I imagine that's what the person is talking about. You think the attitude of the hiring manager would be different?
Yeah, I think if you're applying for a job that's going to be remote, and you're going to be interacting with clients all day long,
Mhm.
yeah, I mean, there may be some expectation that you're setting up a home office and maybe that should look a certain way. I think that's a reasonable suggestion.
Yeah, yeah. All right. So I mean, you've talked about a little bit about your interviewing style, but I have a question for you. How many interviews does it normally take for you to decide whether the person is the right one to hire? How many people do you interview? How many interviews are there in the hiring process? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so maybe you'll get a different answer from different people. In my organization, I've got a team of people that they're involved in the interviewing process, and I'm usually involved in the interview when we're closer to making a decision.
Right.
So, but usually they've been through a phone interview or a Zoom interview as a pre-screening, and then a set of interviews with various managers within the organization. And for me, I'm kind of at the end of the line, so I'm interviewing people that have gone through our initial interviews with our managers. So for me, it's just a little different because we're kind of a large organization. If we didn't spread it around a little bit, it wouldn't actually happen. So
Right. So basically, you're the sign-off person. And what you were talking about earlier, are you the one who is determining if the person is a fit for the organization? Because before, the candidate comes to you, it's been determined that the candidate can perform well in terms of their technical skills, correct?
yeah, and I have to say that we're never giving anybody a test, and maybe some organizations do that,
Oh,
but
personality and the analytical tests you're talking about?
or even technical tests. We very much assume that if you've got the credentials on your resume, that you're not misrepresenting that. And so we'll have discussions with people about the technologies that are being used, and we're happy to hear that they have a basic understanding. But as I said, my focus is on bringing people into the organization that are going to function effectively. And
Right.
I can send people to a seminar. If they're interested, they can attend coursework at a local university to pick up skills. But I can't fix somebody who doesn't come in with,
Mm-hmm.
to work with others, right? So it's not something that's as easy to fix.
So I'm going to get back to a question from one of the audience members, and uh, she asked, "Are you in the same position at L3 as MSI?" And I imagine because you and I have talked about this, and MSI was smaller than L3 Harris is. So, what was the transition like there?
Yeah, so interesting question, and it's a good one. I think we all go through changes in our careers, and we see opportunities to grow and change. And so I did that. In my early part of my career, I was an engineer. At MSI, I took on a business development role, eventually became VP and general manager of the company. Right. Before it was sold, I was, for the most part, managing day-to-day operations there. But I was doing it in a more of a business development role. At L3 Harris, because I had such a operational background, I was able to step into an operations role as a VP. Okay. And so if I could give one piece of advice that's helped me, it's you adapt to what the company needs and be adaptable, be open to taking on different roles. And so this was, I had managed operations before, but this was a different operational role than I'd had in the past. But I had the background to be able to do that. So I was willing to wear a different hat or wear many hats. In the case of MSI, I wore probably 4 or 5 hats, and right now I'm
at MSI you're talking about?
Yeah, at MSI.
Yeah,
and now
yeah.
L3 Harris, I'm in a more focused role, strictly operations, which was very interesting too. At a time when the company really needed to transition new products from development into production, that was a critical role for the
Right.
just when I joined, and so it was a fun time to join.
So then when you are presented with someone who's coming from a smaller company, coming to L3 Harris, you had that understanding that that person could be a fit, even though that person may have, a breadth of knowledge, but not that focused technical knowledge. Is that correct? Would you give a person like that a chance if you felt they were a good fit?
Absolutely. I think it's a positive whether you come from a large company or a small company. If you're coming from a large company, you know how to leverage resources within the organization and bring the right teams together. That's going to come naturally to you if you come from a larger organization. But if you're coming from a small organization, you come with a different mindset. At least I did. I was responsible for everything, including making sure that we had the money to pay payroll and you name it. I was solving financial problems at the same time I was solving technical problems. And people that can come in and wear that many hats and be more agile and more focused on the customer, I think is a really great set of skills to come with. So I wouldn't say that there's an advantage or disadvantage at all in either case. I think you're coming with a different set of little different bag of skills and yeah, I think you can, when you do interviewing, you can play up those aspects of your prior role. And I think accurately, I think people will understand that.
Right. Now, someone asked earlier, and I didn't get a chance to ask you, but have you ever come across anyone who is overqualified? Have you ever felt that? And what was your reaction to that?
No, I'm not. When I think at times when the word overqualified comes up, what you're really hearing is somebody ask a question about, are they going to stay? Is this
right.
person just looking for a stepping stone until they land the other jobs, one of the other jobs that they are really more interested in? So I think, again, I spend a little bit of time with people on, what their career aspirations are, where do they see themselves in 5 years? During an interview, I'll ask the question, if you could write your own, and with a very focused purpose in mind, I'll ask, if you could write your own job description, regardless of what you're applying for here, if you could write your own, what would it be? And what I'm interested in is
a great question. How many people do well on that? I would think that, wow, that's a hard question to answer.
It's honestly, Bob, it's not a matter of doing well or not. It's a matter of making sure that people are going to be happy coming there.
So you want transparency.
Job and not be fit. You don't want to land a job and then not find that you enjoy being there, right? And so asking people what they really enjoy doing is important, and answering that honestly is important too, because you're going to be searching again in another year.
True. I got to ask you this one. Have you ever asked, what is your greatest weakness?
I do ask people. I'll tell you how I asked that, Bob.
Okay.
I ask people, what would your prior boss say you do well? And people
or
can
not
usually
do well, something like that.
Then I'll follow it up with, are there things that they would have recommended that you do different? And if I appreciate when people are a little bit introspective, they can recognize that they could do some things differently. And have the benefit of once they join the organization, they're going to get performance reviews, just like most places give. And there's always a place for that during the performance review. But I like seeing people that can look at themselves and in a critical way, not an overly critical way, but in a
That
kind of
goes back to that whole emotional intelligence, being aware of oneself and being aware of others, and being able to communicate ultimately, right? Being able to interact well with others.
yeah, yeah, and I have to say also, Bob, that I'm not a big fan of asking questions that put people on the spot.
Yeah, you told me that yesterday. You don't like to really ask those hardball questions, but are there certain questions that people have trouble with though? Oh, so for instance, why did you leave your last company?
Yeah, so I will ask that question, and I like hearing that people have some logic to their decision making, right? If somebody's saying, hey, the business wasn't doing well because of the pandemic, it's all very logical. But
Of course,
if somebody leaves,
all need to be said, right?
right? But if somebody's leaving because they can't get along with people, then I really have to ask some harder questions, right? Because it's
Sure.
equally likely that their boss was a jerk, or it might be that they can't get along with people, and that would concern me. So I do ask those types of questions.
Yeah, I guess that's where you need to make a decision from your gut, right? So I need to get back to a question that, and we're running short on time, but I do want to get back to a question that my customer Steven asked a while back. And do you find looking for employment at a senior executive level is different than mid-level or non-management level?
Yeah, I definitely find that, and
That's strong, yes.
I'll tell you why. Because in a senior role, those roles are not well defined. They generally aren't even, um, they're not published the same way. They'll use a recruiter, and a recruiter will reach out to
Sure. Yeah.
individuals and provide a lot of very unique information for those. And it's hard to get exposed to those roles. So when you're trying to land a position that's a little bit higher in the organization, it's just different. And that was what I struggled with the most. I'll share this. At the time that I was doing my search, I was considering going with, there are people that make a career out of just coaching executives in their transitions. And actually some companies will pay for that when somebody leaves and
Like
goes
out,
to
like,
another.
Lee Harrison.
Yeah, I didn't.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't have access to that, but it's different enough that it warrants thinking about. I didn't know doing that because I found that taking charge of my own process made more sense for me. But there's some people that do say that works for them.
Well, I do have to say that in terms of, your written communications and also your oral communications, that you were one of the job seekers who I would consider to be above, not only, because you were a VP at the time, but you just did it really well. And I admired that. And I tell people when I'm talking about networking, there are some people that really stick out in my mind of good networkers, and you're one of the people I named. So,
Well, it's nice of you to say, Bob. And like I said, I got a lot of help from you and others in my process, and I'll share this. I needed a sense of normalcy in my life at that time. When you're kind of at loose ends and you're not, I was 30 years without having to do a search, right? And so I didn't have the skills and in doing that, and it felt really strange to not have my day planned. I didn't, and showing up at the Career Center on a regular basis felt good to me because it became kind of part of my routine. I put a nice shirt on and
yeah.
and show up.
And I missed the times
looking like I'm ready for the job, and that helped me, and
yeah.
getting a little bit of a routine going was good for me. And so, one other thing, I treated this job search like a job, and it was, it was a full-time job for me. And I'll just share this. You gotta also know when to clock out. And I never felt like, you don't feel like you're making progress. So you never feel like you can clock out for the day.
No, thank you for saying that. Absolutely.
You got to do that. You got to, try starting your day learning a little bit about what's happening in your field, and then do your networking, apply for positions, and then at the end of the day, say, okay, I put in a full day. Now I'm not going to think about it until tomorrow morning. And you really have to do that for yourself. You have to be kind to yourself in this process.
I'm glad you said that. Listen to this guy, wherever you are on the screen. Listen to this guy. You got to take a break every once in a while. I'm not talking about a 2-month break. I'm talking about a day or two, or who knows, because sometimes we do have the tendency to burn out. And I think that's where Gerry's going with that, is we don't want you to burn out. We want you to, right? I mean, don't athletes take a break? Don't they get a day or two off to rest their bodies and so forth? Well, same goes for the human mind, really.
You got it. And it's a marathon. For me, like I said, it took longer than I expected, and you have to get to the finish line. So take your weekends off, do things with your family.
But you did it, and I got my cheesecake. All right, Gerry, any closing thoughts? Or, I mean, you just gave us this wealth of information, so I really, really thank you very, very much for it. And I think everyone who got on today is still here. Yep. So I think they enjoyed what you talked about. I know I did enjoy what you talked about, and I learned from you and other guest speakers, and so I really think that this is going to continue, definitely. And I thank you very much for being one of the guest speakers that I've had so far.
Thanks for the opportunity, Bob, and thank you all.
I'm not blowing smoke, okay?
Thanks. I enjoyed the
Say
hour
hi
with
to
you
Michael
guys.
and your daughter and your wife, and have a good holiday season, okay? And
Wishing
most of
you all
all,
the best.
be safe. Be safe.
You do this.
Okay.
Thanks. Enjoy the holidays, everybody.
All right. Thank you.